Stacy Jorgensen, and this is Independent in an Instant. And today I'm here with my amazing friend and incredible mentor, Gary Rubin, incredible sales agent, incredible human being. Hi, Gary.
Hi.
So Gary and I met back in the day when I took his class at UCLA, and he walked me through independent film distribution, and today he's going to do the same for you guys. So Gary, will you tell me a little bit about your career and how you got to where you are now?
Okay. Like you, at a young age, did a little bit of producing, but found it an extremely hard way to make a living. And in that process, I discovered acquisitions and also distribution and became fascinated with both, and have been fortunate enough over the last 20 plus years to have a series of jobs, October, Artisan, my own company, First Independent, and now Cohen Media, where I was able to do both.
Yeah, that's awesome. And, you know, maybe some of the people watching are a little bit younger and might not know what made Artisan Films famous.
Blair Witch Project.
Yeah, so I would love for you to just kind of tell me like a highlight project from each of the companies you've had the chance to work with.
October's biggest film, and I was there for it, was a film called Secrets and Lies.
Awesome film.
Did almost 15 million at the box office 20 years ago, so that was a pretty good number. Mike Lee directed it, and it was nominated for several Academy Awards. It was a lot of fun to be part of that.
Yeah, it's great. And then what about with your work at First Independent, and then your work now with Cohen Media?
At First Independent, we didn't really have a breakout picture, but we had several that I was very proud of. Rob Siegel's Big Fan with Patton Oswalt. Holy Rollers with Jesse Eisenberg.
Both great films.
A terrific film called New York Doll, directed by Greg Whiteley. Edmund, which was a David Mamet project, directed by Stuart Gordon with William Macy. That's just a handful.
For sure.
I had some really terrific little films, if I may say.
Absolutely. And you've really seen I would say the rise of the independent film. I mean, watching the entire breakout of Blair Witch, I think completely changed the landscape of independent film.
The first rise took place beginning, it's January 1989.
With Sex, Lies, and Videotape.
Right.
At the Sundance Film Festival, which used to be called?
The U.S. Film Festival. So the 90s were an absolute boom period. This was in 1999 now that Blair Witch came out, and, you know, very few independent films had broken $100 million. We bought Blair Witch at Artisan, and we thought, hey, this might do $5 million.
And that would have been a lot.
It would have been a very good number. It did $142 million.
Jeez.
So that was very exciting to be a part of that.
Hell yeah. I mean, I think for the kids today that might think that Paranormal Activity is the first ultra low budget film to break out, if you haven't seen the Blair Witch Project, go see that film and know that Gary Rubin was a part of that magic. So Gary, you know, because you have been in acquisitions and sales for a massive part of your career, I would love to just kind of talk about why independent filmmakers should use a sales agent. What makes that relationship valuable? I just would love to know, you know, in this day and age with self-distribution being so easily accessible, why should independent filmmakers use a sales agent?
Well, let's assume you're an independent producer and you've financed your film.
Right.
And you're making your film.
Yeah.
Now, what's the next step?
Right.
You want to get the best distribution possible, right? Let's put foreign aside for a second.
Okay.
Let's talk about domestic. You want to be with a premier distributor, if at all possible.
Because it gets eyeballs on your film.
Right. And you have probably the best chance of making the most money, too.
Right.
And yes, it'll get you notoriety as well.
Got it.
So how do you do that? Well, the best way to do that is to get your film into Sundance or Toronto.
Would you say of all the film festivals, those two have the biggest marker and they're the biggest predictors of success?
The way I would put it is, if you want to sell a film, domestically oriented film,
Yes.
the best way to do it is get it into one of those two.
Okay.
It's hard to do it yourself.
Correct.
The best way to do that is to hire a sales agent.
Great. So, I mean, that's perfect, right? So, in a perfect world, 1,000% agree. Get a sales agent, get into Sundance. But let's just say that someone is in the middle of the country and they have their first film. They've maybe not spent a ton of money on it, but it's complete, it's done. How can they attract a sales agent? At what point?
Well, the first piece of advice I'd like to give is, do not show your film to anybody.
You were the first person to ever tell me
Even if
that.
Harvey Weinstein calls you, do not show the film.
The completed film?
The completed film. You want to show it to everybody at the same time. But really, you should not be the one doing this yourself. Your sales agent should be doing that. Now, how do you get a sales agent? Mm-hmm. Well, let's start with who they are.
Okay.
There's 5 sales agents that control about what I would call about 90% of the business.
Wow.
4 of them are the big 4 Hollywood agencies that have departments that do this.
The film packaging, finance,
right,
yeah,
exactly.
sales.
CAA, WME, UTA,
and
ICM. Exactly. The 5th is a company in New York called Cinetic Media. Those 5, as I say, control, in my estimation, about 90%.
Wow, even an IM Global wouldn't be in that batch.
IM Global is primarily a foreign sales company, and more often than not, the bigger films that they're involved with will go through one of those 5.
Through the agencies domestically,
yeah,
absolutely.
They do occasionally a smaller film they'll do themselves.
Right, because, and just to break it down, generally when the agencies are repping the project, it's essentially because they were packaging at the beginning, which, you know, we'll get into.
Sometimes, yes. Not always.
Not always.
But most of the time.
They have a stake.
But you make a good point, though. If you're somebody looking for a sales agent, it's hard to just walk in the door at CA and say, rep my film.
Right.
Which brings us to a good point. If you can, and it's risky, manage to get your film into Sundance or Toronto by yourself, they will chase you down.
Mm-hmm. You're a unicorn.
Yes. So they, at that point, it's market share, and they fight over the films in competition.
Absolutely.
So I don't really recommend doing it that way.
Right.
I recommend
coming there with an agent attached, whether it be a sales agent from the big 5 or a smaller sales agent.
And look, they may say to you, if you can even get to them, I'm not going to say yes right now. Why don't you try to get your film into Sundance or Toronto? If you can get it in, then we'll handle it.
Then we'll rep you, yeah.
Something like that. But the first try should be to try to get either one of those 5 or a few others. I'm not going to get into the list, but there's a handful of others that are almost as powerful. And then there's maybe, it's like an A- list, and then there's maybe like a B+ B list of another few who are just not as big and not quite as powerful.
Got it. But at some point, it's better to have someone on than no one, but it's also better to have no one than the wrong.
Don't try, and kids, don't try this at home.
Right.
Don't try to sell your own film. You will. It's a credibility thing. The acquisitions people will say, why doesn't a major agent or even a medium agent handle this?
Such a good point.
Something's wrong.
Yeah, and not to, again, segue too far off the topic, but in the domestic space, a lot of companies won't even deal with independent filmmakers. They will only deal with an aggregator. You couldn't personally go to Netflix or Amazon, and sell and get.
You used to be able to some extent, not anymore.
Right, you have to go through a representative.
Yeah, some kind of representative or aggregator.
Right.